So today we're covering Eplan best practices. Obviously, just want to welcome you. I'm Craig Walker. I'm a project manager here at Eco Design, and we have Farhana with us today, giving me a bit of a hand. It's the first webinar for 2026. Please email any topic requests. We have a couple more topic requests come through recently that we will attend to this year. There'll be 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. Recording of this session will be made available to anyone that wants one, and we can also provide the slides and the project file if you want that as well, so no problem. So what we're going to go through today, we're going to have a bit of an overview, and this is going to talk about onboarding of efficiency into your company once you have Eplan and start getting running with it. We're going to talk about reusability, and that's a term I'm going to use a lot today. We will talk about the idea of allocating an Eplan officer or putting someone in charge of controlling your Eplan documents and etc. When to maintain efficiencies and good practices around that. What is your master data, just so you understand what exactly is being managed. We'll look at the Eplan installation and best ways to go about that, a little bit of project management and part databases. We'll follow that with a more detailed guide, and in this I'll show you roughly where to find a lot of these features and look at a couple of other features, including file revisions and a way to manage that, project templates, which are also called basic projects, your project settings, your user settings, parts data, report templates. There's a lot in here. We'll work through it. There'll be quite a bit involved in this presentation today. Keyboard shortcuts, property arrangements. Some of this actually falls into personal work efficiencies. Some information on workspaces, import and export interface and how it's important to know what this is and how to use it. Synchronizing your projects for both parts and for master data. And also, as I said, some user efficiencies will be in there. And in the end, I'll touch really briefly on macros, but no macros really in this presentation today. And then some live demos of all the features and where to find them with a summary. So let's have a look at a bit of an overview. And this is the what, how, and why you want to work efficiencies into Eplan and where you find them. So this is just an overview here, a bit of a graph we've used for a couple of years, explaining the process of when you start using Eplan and onboarding it. What we've got is this dotted line here representing your standard amount of time to draft up a project in Eplan, not in Eplan, in whatever you used previously. And when you switch to Eplan, obviously there's going to be a little bit of inefficiencies when you start, and that's just learning the software and getting used to it. After a while, maybe that same amount of time again, roughly, you start to get quicker using Eplan than you would with your previous software, and then you make back that time as well as start getting advantages over that. Now, the most important curve on this graph, which is what we're covering today, is the reusable Eplan elements. So as soon as you start completing your first project, your first couple of projects, you want to start building up this repository of reusable elements. And by making use of them, controlling them, and reusing them, you will end up reducing your drafting time and gaining a whole lot of savings on time over time with your new projects. So today, as I said, we'll talk about reusability. The idea of this within Eplan is to try and stay away from completely bespoke elements. You don't want to be redesigning the wheel every time. You want to think bigger, generic picture. What's a good company practice? What do we want our company's image to be in terms of the reports we present in our projects, the documentation, etc. And obviously, new jobs are going to require some new additions to your reusable elements, some new elements you can work in the future. So it's never a complete process, but the amount of new elements should reduce over time, but there will always be new ones, and it's managing that. As well as, I mean, this fits in as well with developing company standards, your standard operating procedures in terms of how we want our company to control our Eplan repositories and who's going to take charge of that, and then managing that to make sure that it's followed. So this brings us to the concept of an Eplan officer. Now this is, I mean, it's a term, you can replace it with a different term if you want, but it's effectively someone within the company that's going to take ownership of how your Eplan's used and managing your data repositories. So this involves your imported parts data and keeping your parts databases up to date and cleanly presented, your reports and forms, having those up to date, your basic projects and project templates. So every new job, you're starting with something that has most of the work taken care of or most of the heavy lifting ready to go straight away, as well as your plot frames and macros. So one of the most important bits here is communication over the ePlan changes. This is something that's not done well enough. And that involves letting people know in your company or your other ePlan users that you work with where they can find these efficiencies, where they can find the reusable elements, and maybe exactly where they should be using them. So there's no confusion in terms of what they're picking up and reaching for when they want to kind of save time on building the new projects. The ePlan officer should take care of the versioning and the revision control of all these files, and I'll talk a little bit about how to manage that, and also maintaining these common repositories. And I've got a bit of a note down here. This is just kind of a bit larger picture, but it involves what kind of level your involvement with ePlan is as a company. I mean, if you've got single users and you've got a single office running all your repositories and all your master data in a local storage or is absolutely fine. It won't be an issue. When you start getting to multiple users in a single office, you really want to look at, say, a server or even maybe some of the advanced settings, advanced options. And this gives everyone in your office the access to the same master data. Finally, when you get to a multi-user setup across multiple domains, and that's like having multiple offices across New Zealand or across the world, and you all want to get access to the same master data, so you're using the same reusable elements, you really want to start looking at maybe a VPN or a cloud server options for that. So, I mean, this is something you can contact us on if you want more information on how to set it up best for your company. Next, we have when to manage ePlan. And the reason I put in the slide is we've seen people jump in and try and set up all their reusable elements right at the start before they've used them. And what they often find is that the way they're actually using their elements when they come to use them is different to how they imagined they may be using them when they created them. So they've burned a lot of management time and then gone to use them and found it's just not going to work the way they wanted. So what we suggest is a work cycle following the bottom here. So one of the first important things is just dive into your first project. Get your first job done and your first set of drawings. Once you've got that set of solid drawings, you can then capture and update the reusable elements from that set of drawings and then produce, say, basic projects or template projects from that. Then communicate to your team saying, when we create the next project, we have this initial group of reusable elements. Finally, when you go to start the new job, they start with the reusable elements, meaning a lot of the next job undertaken job is a lot easier and already catered for. And in this way, you're only incorporating new elements each time, and you're only incorporating elements you've already tested and used. So you're not trying to design things before you're using them. You're actually using them and then incorporating them into reusable design. Yeah, so the management should be retroactive, not try to be proactive with this, respond after the task. And proactive management causes speculation and rework. You do not want to have to rework all your reusable elements because you got them wrong how you set them up. So this is a big one. We get asked quite regularly, what and where is my master data? So it's important to know where it is and what it is. Your master data is effectively this list of items on the left here, and you can find this under your ePlan settings, under user management, under the directories, and you will see the directories that it uses to store your master data. And this involves templates for extractions. It involves your forms are quite important, used for your reports. Your plot frames, if you've got a single plot frame, we'll update that regularly. Macros are an important one. So there's quite a few here that you're using every time you use ePlan, but knowing where they're stored, either in a cloud repository or locally, that's important so you can access them and keep them up to date. At the top here, you can see I'm actually using a OneDrive cloud scheme, and that's just my experimentation at this point. But you've got a drop-down option to choose different options for that, and our other options I'll show you later. We have a server we use at Eco Design, as well as we do have a local-based system in case we're working off-site. So as of our installation guides that we provide when we provide ePlan, is you have a directory we suggest you use, especially for 2026, and that's ePlan, C drive ePlan 2026/system data. And we suggest keeping every year's master data independent, but then copying across what you need to use. And in this way, you won't confuse things like parts databases from previous years, and it will still give you access to previous revisions if you ever do need to. So a bit more of a note on that, on the correct Eplan installation. We provide a guide. The guide specifically tells you to use user-defined recommended ways of installing directory structures. Our guide shows you that these are the directories you are replacing. And this is what we provide here in terms of where you want to store the data. And you can see system master data there is Eplan 2026 system data. It's one important thing to remember about this is it's not simply, can I get Eplan installed and working? Our software is a bit beyond that. Eplan's a bit bigger than that. And it's really, can I install Eplan so I can easily manage it moving forward? So being aware of where it puts things or how it sets it up in your system and runs means you'll be able to manage these reusable elements easier. One other thing I want to talk about is project backups versus live project editing. This is the projects you open and work on. It's always backup projects is what we suggest. We at Eco Design backup daily, and we have a system that is shown down the bottom here. We suggest putting initials, a date, at the end of whatever you're working on the project as a ZW1 backup file. And this means if you need to reincorporate sections you've deleted, you've still got that backup, as well as you can see who's done this backup if you get a edit later on and you need to refer to someone else in your company to see who's made an edit in this. It is totally possible to share projects online, not online, but in a server and have multiple people work on it at once in a collaboration manner. And it's not only possible, but we have a webinar coming up later in the year on collaboration. Multi-users working on a single project. It is slower to work that way. You can only work on individual pages at a time and not on the same page as someone else, as well as it carries a minor risk, very minor. We've had one corrupt project in 4 years, and that involved trying to update a project between versions over the network, and it was still, because the person used backup, it was quickly fixed. So backup anyway, add dates and initials, and you've just guaranteed to never lose any of your data. It's just good Eplan practice. You can always clean these up later as well if you want. When you finally submit and finish a project, you can delete the older versions. So parts databases, this isn't parts independently, this is the actual repositories for the parts, the storage of them and sharing of them. There are 4 ways of doing it. There are 3 that we suggest or use quite regularly. The first 3 are Eplan, which you can see in this box under the settings for user management parts. Your Eplan parts database is your local parts database or a file structure based parts database. That works for most instances and will work on a network server. An upgrade for that, which I personally prefer, is the SQL server. I run my own parts database on my own machine, but I run an SQL server, both to be familiar with how it was set up and run, but it's a nice way to share across domain as well. So that SQL server is definitely a preferable option. There's some other advantages that have been put in 2026 with that. API is an API parts database. I mean, we at Eplan work with a lot of APIs for Eplan, but this is different. This is an API parts database, and it's very rarely used. And finally, there's the eStock collection is the third main option that we can suggest. That's an Eplan cloud-based parts database that you can have every one of your users point at and use. And it comes with a level of controls as well, allowing you to select which parts are backed up, when they're updated, who updated them. So that level of advanced management on parts is in there as well to provide transparency. So we suggest the SQL eStock is best for larger companies. And I have the same table down the bottom here as I had previously, just with a slight change that, when you get to multi-users across domains, you're really looking at that SQL or cloud database level. It's much smoother. We have had people use VPNs across networks, and it's just nicer to run with the SQL option. So now a bit more of a detailed guide going into some of the finer bits and where to find them, where to set them up, and how to configure it. So let's talk about file revision management. If you've used Eplan for a while, you've no doubt created a report. So revisioning is good for reports, report forms. It's good for your basic projects, which are your template projects. It's good for your plot frames. And the easiest way to do this is just to simply add to the file name. And you can see examples here of what we've worked through the couple of years. We've got a 5-line report on the left, and we've got version 2, version 3, version 4, version 5, version 6 created. These have got dates next to them. It is suggested you could put a date in there as well after the version, which will indicate when it's created, because someone could go back and access and edit a previous version, so the file dates aren't always correct. And we have parts lists, and we've done the similar thing with our parts list form, saying like this is a version 2, version 3, and we improve our parts lists, and we know and we have communicated internally to always reach for the most recent parts list because it's the tidiest and it's the best represented, we believe. So this is an easy way to create revisioning with your files, and how to keep your master data tidy and understand what's created when and who's using it. And as I said before, communicate this through your company. Next, talking about basic project setup. A basic project is a template project. It's the Eplan term for it. And it's effectively should contain all project settings pre-configured. You will alter a lot of project settings when you start your first project. You'll change the way various things work in about 50 different locations, including report, templates, etc. But having that all set up and then saving your basic project means that next project, when you create a project from that template project, you're not setting anything up twice. You're using everything exactly as it was when you finished the last project. So it's almost seamless work carrying forward. A lot of the stuff you create is instantly regenerable. You can regenerate it into your project. So there's no double handling or working through. And if you do have to make edits, you end up reducing the amount of edits you need down to 5%, rather than having to do the whole, is the structure set up, is the project set up, how am I changing my DTs? There's a lot that's actually contained in your basic project, which we'll go through shortly. You should have your project structured predefined. That's a big one. Laying out your project, you don't want to have to do that twice. And you should have default selections for terminals and connection definitions, how you represent terminals and connection definitions on your pages, and what looks good in PDF and what you want to use as your company standard. And should have all reports templates set up, as I said before. Again, save your basic projects with revision number and date, and that way you'll know exactly what's the latest basic project you've created, or that you have available or have created for your company. Project and user settings. This is one of the first bits to set up. Project settings are quite important because, as I said, they carry everything with it. And within the project settings, there's things like syncing the master, whether you sync the master data on boot up every time. That's an option that pops up that some people ask about. How you do your online numbering. And what online numbering means is when you place new devices, how it auto instantiates the DT, or what the DT is set as. Your unit structures, millimeters squared for cross-sectional diameters, etc., and the symbols libraries that are used. This is just an example of a couple, and you can find them under Eplan settings, under best practices, and you can export them by right-clicking on that best practices, and then you can import them back into another project. So even if you don't want to create the basic project from an existing project, you can still copy everything or move everything from a completed project into a blank project to have it set up correctly, and then save that as your template project. So there is the ability to move things around without having to manually do everything element by element, but you'll find them under the settings there for the project. The user settings, what's important to mention about that is that it carries things like your shortcut keys, your master data directories, which we saw earlier, the user management directories, your parts database setups, which we've just shown. All this carries with your user settings. And this is a good practice to export and then import this on every new install or machine that you run Eplan on within your company. And that way, everyone's set up correctly. Every machine's working the same way. When people change between machines or even try and provide help to someone else in the company, they're able to guide them directly to this through the same interface and the same setup and layout that they're used to on their own machine. So it's good to have that set up as a company kind of initiative. Insert center favorites is another one there. And If you use the insert center quite heavily, your favorites are saved under user settings and exported, and that way someone else can go to the favorites on the insert center and pop things in pretty quickly, and it's saved the same favorite setting, favorite group. Next, having a look at parts management and the data portal. This isn't parts databases. This is the individual parts within the parts database. All we can suggest is that you take the little bit of extra time, the extra 5 minutes, to complete parts data where you can. And the reason for this is when you need to clone a part, you need to clone a breaker because you can't find it in the data portal, you need to create a new part. It's too easy just to put in the bare minimum there to have it displayed correctly on your page. And then you'll have to come back and rework it when you do the reports, because you'll find that it doesn't have the correct data to show nicely on your report, and the part isn't properly represented. And then you'll have to come back and do it again if you want to use the part in Pro Panel or for wire routing, etc. So we suggest that, you take the extra 5 minutes and do it once and do it correctly. And you can see on the left here, we've got a whole lot of blank data missing. The values aren't in there. On the right, we've got a Siemens part directly from the data portal. And you can see that a little bit of extra has been put in there, and straight away it'll work more seamlessly when reused and turn up better in your reports. So it is easy to take the short path, but it's better to get things done properly, and then obviously again communicate the fact that parts have been updated or you've taken care of everything. Looking at reports templates and why. There's two ways to generate reports. One is actually under this tab here under reports, and the other one is under templates. Now the difference is reports have to exist in your project. They have to have actual physical pages in your project. And the moment you delete your physical pages of your report, you lose your report. The whole setup you've gone through with putting in filters, settings, page structure of where it's presented, the name of that report, it's all lost instantly. With a template, you don't need to have it in your project. It can be completely deleted from your project. You can finish your work and then generate them into the project. So it's a template for the report that you can have them set up for all the reports with the structures, the filters, and everything you'd like to use for all your projects for your company, and then have that move with the project, the basic project or the template project. The advantages here as well, you can generate multiple at once. So by clicking on the highest level, such as the best practices project there, and on the play button, it'll generate all your reports in one go. And then you can finick around with them if you want, but it's just a mass report population without ever losing them, and no need to recreate them. So the backspace key, this is quite a hidden property that a lot of people don't know about, and it's for default project inserts. So it's often hidden, an unknown feature, and you can use it for your terminal types, your connection definition points, your black boxes, your PLC boxes. You can also use it for the black box and PLC device terminals and PLC terminals, the types used, or device connection points. And these selections, whatever you've set it up and are running with, will save when you save your basic project. So next time you go to insert, it'll use whatever was configured. I mean, on the left here, we have a basic terminal that you can put in with insert terminals. I'll show you this in the live demo, but by hitting the backspace key, I can choose this version, which I prefer to use. This is a minor preference, but something like connection points. On the left here, I've had to put the insertion points on, which is the I key, and you can see the black square is showing a connection point, but without that insertion point, you wouldn't even know it's there. And we get projects with a lot of these scattered all over the show. Whereas choosing a connection definition point that appears like this is easier to see. It's nice to have the text next to. You can see that this is where it's defined. On the left here, you can see without the insertion point, there is no graphic for it whatsoever. So you can change the default one of this and then use it every time. It allows access for standard black boxes, the square black boxes, but you can also do polygram black boxes. So then you can actually define shapes that will run around sections of your drive, section of your project. Same with PLC boxes and yeah, PLC polygon boxes. The backspace will allow you to change the config. You'll need to remember that you hit the backspace to convert back later if you need to use just a PLC black box. Similarly, you can choose, as I said, device connection points or PLC connection points through that with the backspace key, and it will save whatever selection you want to use, depending if you're defining points or defining connections looking differently. So pre-configured property arrangements. What this involves is once you place say an interrupt point is just an example. It's probably the most simple example I could think of for this. When you place it on the page, it has a tendency to put the property arrangement in one location. With insertion points as an example or other symbols, you can push tab key to rotate it, which will allow you to get from this top left one to a representation that looks like this the top right one, sorry, to the top left one. But what you can't do is auto configure it, so it will appear as the bottom here with the tab key alone. So if you go into one of these and go to properties and then display, there is a list of 30 predefined options that you can choose. And you can say, I want to appear on the right side of the object at 0 degrees, or I want it to appear below that 90-degree rotation. Making use of these rather than fiddling around and trying to drag these properties around is much quicker. It's a much more efficient way of working, but you can also create your default settings yourself. So if you have a layout with a device, functional template, functional text, a technical specification, and that's nicely displayed next to your symbol with your part data, you can then save that and say, I want this to travel with my basic project, in which case everyone then knows what they're reaching for and using without having to manually configure device tags on placed parts every time or property arrangements. Shortcut keys. This is quite critical because this will save you a lot of time. If you're not familiar with them, if you're manually crawling through the Eplan menu to find things, we lose things in the Eplan menu because it's quite extensive. But there's a couple of critical ones that if you get sorted and get set up, it'll be quicker, your workflow will be quicker, it'll be more seamless. The most important one that I cannot stress enough, I use it every time I use Eplan, is Control 1 and Control 2. And this can be found up here. It's the copy format and assign format. And I'll show you this in the live demo, but it pretty much means your property arrangement you have on one part, you can then auto assign that to another part. And by doing that, you can say take the correctly laid out predefined property arrangement of your first breaker and then assign it to the next 20 in one shortcut key. Other hotkeys, which are pretty critical, insert symbol. This is when you're dropping a symbol in directly onto the multi-line or single line schematic. There's insert part. We use that more than we use symbol because we place parts most of the time rather than symbols. And insert macros to draw directly from your macro library of where you want to use a sub-circuit or insert pages. And we usually use insert, shift insert, and control insert, or something similar to that. But it doesn't matter what you use, as long as you've got those quickly available at your fingertips, which stops you having to start crawling through, say, the insert center or trying to find where to find parts to insert and drag into your project. And this can be sorted. All these can be configured through the user settings. And as I said, you can copy them between machines by exporting and importing those user settings. And to get to them, you effectively, I'll show you, you right click here on your quick action bar and click on customize ribbon with the right mouse button. Left click on customize ribbon. You'll get a pop-up and it's just down the bottom here called shortcut keys customize. And it will bring up this third pop-up, which is a completely clean interface, which allows you to choose any of the commands available in Eplan, and it'll tell you the current shortcut key and allow you to assign a new one. So workspaces and workspace exports. When you enter your environment every morning, you boot up your Eplan, you've got a specific layout that you're familiar with. If you've ever had that change on you, it's a nightmare because you suddenly start trying to hunt around and find things or trying to find how do I set this up like I had it before. These are workspaces. You pretty much left click on your name in the top right of Eplan to be able to get access to them. Clicking on any of these, you can actually have predefined workspaces if you prefer ways to work or layouts specific to whether you're doing ProPanel or whether you're doing a multi-line schematic edit. So that's possible, but besides that, you can also export your workspace. And it's good to keep a backup of your own workspace at all times so that you can just import it if you ever have a problem. Similarly, You can share this. You can actually import, export. I'll go through these buttons in a second, but you can import and export this workspace setting and then share it with everyone else that's using ePlan in your company. And again, that helps with collaboration when you're trying to guide someone else to use a feature. You can just say, oh, it's this part here in the quick action bar, and they'll understand, they'll be able to see it. And it's the same quick action bar as you've got loaded on your machine. So again, it's going bespoke can work sometimes for some people, but getting that uniformity means that everyone will be working quicker and able to work with each other. If you make any changes to your workspace, don't forget you've got to go up and save it. And it's just the save button again. Talking about these buttons here, we have the import and export interfaces. The reason I've given this a slide on itself, because you will see these right through ePlan. This is a standard menu that appears on the side of a whole lot of different schemes, settings, forms, etc., and allows you to import and export current forms or current objects or whatever it is that ePlan's using. You can create a copy of them. You can save them. You can create a new one. You can edit the existing one or delete it. And just to show you that quickly here, I mean, you can see this is a workspace, but I can create a clone of the workspace. I can edit the workspace or the properties associated with it, and I can import and export. So you'll see this everywhere. It's very useful to know what it is and be aware of where you see it and what abilities you have to import and export from ePlan. Synchronizing projects. Projects can actually act as a ferry, a data ferry. So your projects will hold parts data. They'll also hold a lot of master data. So you can use it to carry master data to someone else's PC. If you're sharing a project or collaborating with another company, they're able to import your master data or your forms as you've created them from your project that you've shared into their master data. Hopefully they've named it differently to stay unique from yours. And synchronize means if they've created unique parts and shared it in the project, you can import them directly into your parts database and use them directly from there. Again, it's good practice because, I mean, if you've half done your parts and you're sharing them, then the other company is getting, bits of parts rather than complete parts, and it can look a bit rough. So it's good practice, and it's good to know that these exist and also how to use them. We get asked about them a lot, and which one do you use? So in the live demo, I'll go through a bit of that. User efficiencies, there's a lot to cover in here. I'll show you most of this in the live demo, but just to mention a few, edit in a table. You can edit multi-points in a table, PLC points, multi-devices, multi-breakers all at once. It's a lot quicker than opening them individually and typing in values. Find is something we all probably know how to use in ePlan, just the Control F key on a set of pages or on a single page, or the entire project. But what's regularly hidden is replace, and I'll show you where to find the replace. It took me a while to find that originally when I first started with ePlan, but very powerful, and how you can use it to update an entire project very, very quickly. Same with edit and table, but along with that edit and table comes the edit properties externally, which allows you to edit properties in Excel. Not to mention that the edit and table, the table columns and rows and cells can be copied and pasted directly in and out of Excel. So it's Excel compatible straight away, which is beautiful. You've got an F2 quick editing option. This is like direct edit, but temporarily. Very nice feature. Control drag is something else I'll show you. I was showing this recently. It quite impressed me. And then editing global properties. This can sound like a nightmare, and I have tended to stay away from it. But when you know how to use it properly, it saves you a lot of time. And I can show you that quickly as well. Just going to talk about macros very, very briefly. Macros is obviously the next level, the highest level of project efficiencies. They're banked sub-pages or sub-schematics for quick use, if you didn't know what the macro system was. They require a macro project. They're not transported with the project. They live in your macro directory. And our next webinar, I've got more details on it at the end, but it will be roughly on macros at the end of March. And a lot more efficiencies beyond this presentation. You can import to start onboarding a macro. It's important to start onboarding a macro process into your company. And for this, it's best to reach out to us if you want, after next week's presentation, next month's presentation. If you do want a hand just getting started, please feel free to reach out. So macro good practices, just a note if you're already doing macros, and just a few things that you should keep in mind is, again, put in the extra 5 minutes just to put in a revision number and a description. If these are done well, your macro will be more likely reused by your company because they know where it fits and what it is. If you don't, it will tend not to be used and you'll waste the time creating it. And again, communicating what's available, what macro is available, where they can be used. Done well, a macro archive, macros achieve, 80% of your drafting work and about 10% of the time. So you can really smash out that drafting time by good macro use. Right, switching over to some live demos, running you through some of the stuff and showing you where to find it. Just find Eplan. Right. So I have a project for today, just a best practice project. And we'll go through a few of these. Master data settings and view. I've got a shortcut key here again in my workspace setup, which goes to settings, but the manual way is file and then settings. And this is all your settings here. So what we've effectively got is your project settings. And these, as I said, you can right click and export and import, and you have your user settings. And as I showed you before, under management, you've got your directories, which is all your master data here. And you've also got parts. This is your part database setup here. One thing I wanted to show you quickly while we're here is the SQL Server interface has recently had this connection test. So if you're having trouble getting your SQL Server set up, you're able to use this within the parts setup itself, the parts database setup, just to ping or connect to that server to see if you've got that SQL Server connection able to be made. So there's a lot of power in these features. I could go through the details in your project settings for quite a while, but online numbering is one that I find really useful. When you place a new part or a new symbol, it's how you want it numbered, and you can have your schemes here and how you set up your schemes. And that's something that, if you get configured correctly, will make placing all your parts a lot quicker. So there's a lot in there, and you'll see when you start changing settings or configuring things that, if it is project, it's good to keep it in that basic project when you create it. Project backup button. If you didn't know where this was, it was under file. Oh, backup. Sorry, it's right there. Yep. You're going through settings all morning. Yep. So backup. I've lost it myself. The backup button's there. When you create a backup of a project, it'll offer to back it up. It'll also save the backup directory where it was last backed up. And again, we always suggest you just either put a version on it, but definitely like a GW for my initials, 27 Feb 2026. Easy to find, know who created it, who backed it up. That's project backups. Part database settings, I've just shown you those. They're under settings. There's different settings within there. One of the other advanced features, I'll show you roughly where to find this under master data. To get access to your parts database for viewing, it's parts management in the top left here, and this is all the parts within it. One advantage you can do is down the bottom here under extras, you have the ability to export or edit all your parts externally, edit properties externally. So you can alter mass amounts of your parts and fill in things like your own personal stock system numbers in there to get your parts database updated en masse quickly. So that's the parts database and the part database settings. Basic project saves and uses. This was where I was kind of hitting before. So up to file, extras, and then create basic project. This will allow you to save your project as a basic project and create that template. Where it's used is if I then go file and then new project. Here, it has the basic projects, and a lot of people will start with something like an IEC basic project provided by Eplan, a ZW9. But here you really want to be choosing your latest revision of your company's basic project to work with. So you can see where it's used every time you create a new project. Project settings I've covered and shown you where to find the settings for that. Parts created badly. Just showing you a bit of use for this. We've got a couple of parts here. This part here is missing all its details. Like if I pop it open, it's just a isolator. We've got a parts. It's a Catco isolator in here. CSL do these, they do really well. Under here, we have no parts data. I mean, this has been created on the fly. It's been kind of hacked into the system. It'll do its job for one or two purposes, but this is going to have to be revisited and updated many, many times over and over again. Every time it's tried to be used in a report, or next time it's tried to use in ProPanel. It's a messy way to create a part. Some parts have more data. I mean, this one came directly from the data portal, and it's something to be aware of is that it doesn't always come through with everything. So under here, if I went to something like under that part, if I look at max power dissipation, and this is used for your thermal calculations in ProPanel, it's got no data. It's got probably no clearance data either if it's a VSD drive. So getting that in there and saving it, not just saving it, but it's a reusable element. You want to make sure that that part is done once. So no one else has to go back to the data sheet and try and find out its power dissipation, trying to find out its clearances for a drive. It's not something you want to do twice because it burns time. So avoiding that double working. Some of the other examples of parts done badly. This is a panel layout. You can see the Siemens part has come in and it's got this beautiful 2D details, and this will make a very presentable and nice looking panel layout when you use Eplan. On the left, you can see it's a Schneider electrical part that's been brought in. They haven't bothered attaching a part in the data portal. This can be cleaned up. This can be pointed at a point where we use other Schneider electrical breaker images for the 2D graphic, which means it's then corrected. It's important to share that and make sure it's carried forward. Same with terminals. We have some Word-Muller stuff here. Word-Muller do wonderful when it comes to the 3D ProPanel layouts, but in 2D, they pretty much stick to the black boxes and don't include images, whereas Phoenix Contact has a tendency to make these beautiful looking colored terminals to place in your panel layouts. Looking at the data portal details specifically, so you can know what parts data you're getting. And when you import, you'll know what you need to fill in or what to miss and where to collect other things, or if you need to find a replacement, say Schneider Electrical 2D graphic, what to look for in the parts data. This little box that contains the icons that pops up within the data portal tells you exactly what the part data in the data portal has with it. So you can see it's either got the 3D graphics data, it's got the DXF or the 2D graphics data, it has a schematic macro, a logical macro, or it has its functional template, which is its pin definitions for, say, something like a PLC, or a connection point pattern when it comes to 3D wire routing. So you can see if that's in there, or drilling patterns if it's a VSD that's got to be mounted on a panel and not DIN rail mounted. So you can see all of this at a glance within the data portal. I'll pop this open quickly, and hopefully it won't take too long to come to life. Yeah, right. So what you're looking at is just here. And these are the icons. If you ever need a reminder, just a little I button, it pops up and tells you what data is available in each of these parts. And if you're searching for a Schneider electrical breaker and it doesn't have the 2D graphics or the 3D, you can just backspace a couple of digits off it till you get something that is the same number of poles that you can borrow data from. So there's always that option, and knowing that, what you're searching for directly saves time. So that's the data portal and parts created badly. Report templates. If I have a report, say parts data here, the way I usually manage a report in my project is go to tools and then the generate button, and that will open the report for this report here, parts list, and it's placed there within my reports. If I was to delete this, delete, yes, and then go to reports, it's not in there anymore. It's completely gone from the project. The advantage of creating as a template is it exists there under templates, and I can click on it at any time and say, put that back in my project, and it's immediately back there. So by creating all your predefined report templates, you can do all your schematics, all your panel layouts, etc. Then simply go up to generate, choose the highest level, report best practices or the project name, click on play, and generate all your reports. You can see some of the import and export icons are there as well. So you can export this and import report types between projects or templates between projects. It's very useful, very powerful. Templates. Form editing, copy. Okay, this is just a note. When you do edit a form, all reports use a form as their kind of base that they generate with. And Eplan provides examples for a whole heap of different reports, etc. When you edit them, we always suggest you go to copy, not open. And the reason for this is when you go to copy, you can choose a report. Anything with the underscore 001 F27 is an F27. This is a connection list type report. This is one of the base ones provided by Eplan. So by choosing that and clicking on open, it'll then pop up and say what I want to save it as. So the first thing I would do, obviously, is put in that revisioning and call it V1 or V2, maybe pop in your company name beforehand. And that way it'll create a revision of it. And you've never altered that original form that you can go back and reference and view. If you ever need in terms of figure out how they've done something and you haven't altered it or broken it. So it's always good practice to create copies and create new revisions. Same thing applies with plot frames. It has the same drop downs here. Shortcut key menu, again, just right click on your quick access bar here, customize ribbon. It's opened on the other screen. Just drag that in. Down the bottom here, you have your shortcut keys and customize. And that's open on the other screen as well. All right. And then by choosing any of your larger menu options here and then the sub menu option, or down the bottom here is the ability to choose all commands. One that's quite hidden, or I'll just show you is in here, is called Parts Master Data Navigator. And this is something I'll show you in a second, but this is the only place you can find it. And you can assign a shortcut key like I have here. Current shortcut key for my laptop, because it doesn't have a number pad, is Control-Shift-I. I'll show you where you can use that shortly. So that's where to find your shortcut keys and set them up. Shortcut keys in use. Your backspace option, if I go to insert a black box, I have a square-based black box. Cancel. By hitting the backspace key, I can then choose to change it from the standard black box to this polygon black box. And then it'll allow me to place polygon shaped black box. Same methodology is for the PLC box. Same again for device connection points and PLC connection points. What I find most important is terminals, and then backspace, and then you can choose what terminal you want to use for all your terminal placements in your projects. And that means the next project, you're not going through it again or trying to change your terminals or alter their symbols. It's quite easy to, and whatever you've chosen will actually carry with your basic project when you create it. Other shortcut keys, there's a whole lot of place in copy and paste formats, which I've shown you. Synchronized selection, Control S. This is an amazing one. If I wanted to find a device in a navigator, so view, open devices, and I want to find this device, instead of trying to crawl through this menu structure for this project, I can just click on it and Control S, and it's that device there. Takes me 3 seconds to find whatever's on the page in any navigator. So synchronized selection, it's also available on right click, but it's there. Insert symbol, part, macro again, and then there's some other ones here where you can have a look later and test them out for yourself. Copy and assign formatting, very useful, just to show you where it's useful in panel layouts, for an example. If I took this device and push Control-1, I can then go to the next breaker of any type, any breaker as long as it's still a breaker, and I can paste that format. I only added this part number in for showing you the next bit, but I usually leave off part numbers and just have the DT and the legend item. So I just undo that. But terminals as well, I can just grab a terminal format and then say update a terminal, and then update my other terminals, and very quickly clean up a terminal strip. Just do that for later. These are some other efficiencies, but I'll come to those shortly. Just keep going through the list here. It's up next, so we'll give it a go. One thing I learned recently is you can, instead of copying, Control-C, click, and then Control-V to paste another one, you can hold down the Control button and just simply drag the number, sure, and it will create a copy. You can do this with all sorts. So that Control drag is very useful for copying things instantly. F2 for quick editing. There is a way to go to turn on direct editing and then click on the DT to edit that directly and then turn it off again. But another way to do it is just push F2 while highlighting over it, and it allows me to type in that DT or alter that DT directly without having to right click and go to properties and then wait for this property box to load up and then go to the right tab. So you can see you can save a lot of time knowing you can just F2 over, over your different labels. Parts master data navigator, just talking about that. This part on the left has a part number. The part on the right has no part number. What I can do is if I bring up this parts master data navigator, which is what I showed you in the shortcut keys, I can synchronize selection and it will find that part. This is the actual parts data, my parts database. So I can then assign that part to symbols that don't have parts. And you can see it's popped up there straight away. Very, very useful, very powerful, and a nice feature there. Lastly is global edits. I find this quite powerful now. I've started using it quite regularly. If I look at this, we've got an F6 here, and this is a 325-7, and it's here, F6 325-7. If I was to change this part, I'd have to then go to my panel layout and change the part on that. But by going to Properties Global and then changing that part number, so I'm just going to go up one to 316-7. Okay, okay, and okay. It's changed this part number, but it's changed this part number as well straight away. So it keeps whatever you've already placed in your panel layout in line with what you're editing on your pages. Massive time saver there. Running a bit short on time here, but we'll get it done. Property arrangements, just showing you these. With this, you can change the way it laid out by right-clicking, properties, and then rather trying to drag around the interrupt name, you can actually use the property arrangements here and choose which direction the text is. I want the text above it or below it or left or right of it, and then the angle that you want the text. We always use 0 or 90, but you can quickly configure this to change around, put it on below 90 degrees, okay, and you can see it's changed around. And that's as an alternative to dragging around this text and trying to move it. Again, copy and paste format works for this stuff. Very easy. You can create your own ones as well, custom property arrangements. Your workspaces, top right, as I said, click on your name. Oh, no, cancel it. The little bit next to it, little box, workspaces. You can see the list and I can hot swap between my workspaces, or I can edit my workspace and get access to the list of workspaces. I can edit, copy, paste, export from there. Eplan import and export feature, you saw it on this just there, the workspaces. It's in things like, it's in things like the reports, same buttons here. You'll find it in many places in Eplan. Your settings, user management directories, you see it up here. I mean, it's everywhere. It's good to know those symbols. Last couple of points, project synchronization under master data. Synchronizing parts is this left one on master data, and what it will do is it'll tell you which parts are in your project on the left and your system data, your master data on the right, your parts database. And you can move parts back and forward and sort them by the columns and say, show me all the new parts, or the older parts, etc., and move them back and forward. Or you can mass synchronize either your project or your system down the bottom there. Similar methodology with the synchronize project button, the second synchronize. This doesn't do parts data. This does parts. This does project master data. And sorry, it'll take a second longer. So here we can see what this has got a whole lot of excess data that's not required. It's got what the data type is and whether it's newer, identical, or older. This is obviously a project we've kept going for a while, so it's got some older stuff in there. And you can either shift it right to update your master data from your project or update your project from your master data. And again, you have options down the bottom to quickly update your entire system or the project. Last couple of ones, edit and table. If I have a PLC card similar to this and I have a bunch of PLC points, I can open them one by one and start changing tags one at a time, which is a nightmare. Or I can highlight them all, right click and go edit and table, and you'll get a table down the bottom here. So here I can see I've got them all my values here. I can cut and paste groups of this from here to Excel and paste them back in. If you're doing eight points, not so bad, or 8 devices, not so bad in the table, terminals, terminal arrangements, etc. You can do it down here. And then when you close this, it will update everything. Another option, which is faster when you have many pages of PLC data, is you can edit them externally. I have a button here called Export Properties for external editing, but the other option is File, Export, Project Data, Properties, External Editing. And you can see why I've got a shortcut key for finding this. It was created by someone here. But by choosing that, I can choose my PLC points I've got selected, edit in an external application and reload. They've popped up. I can have pages of this if I did the entire project. And then I can just change the data. We're not going to do anything complex here. Save it, close it. Yes, I'd like to import the data, and done. So you can mass edit parts, not from your parts database, but also from your project externally. So it's quite awesome. Last one to show you is find and replace. I mean, here I've got a panel and I've got a black box DT that's got the panel number. I've got it's a text tag for representing locations marked. And I've got the DT of this cable being a composite DT with the panel number W running to, say, a terminal X101. What I can do is click on my project and find all MTP 11011s and go OK. And it gives me a list of them all. The replace option is actually hidden under here, so I can select them all options of it, and go replace. And even if I've selected things that don't have it, it won't replace them. It'll only replace where it finds that tag, and I can say, I've made a mistake. Everything in my project is now panel 2. Okay. And close the search window, and you can see there it's updated the DT, the text field, and the composite tag as well straight away. So very powerful tool with that find and replace. And that's most of the live stuff. I may have missed a point or two, but right. So in summary, there's a lot in this. There's a lot. You can go back. We can give you the video. You can work through it and find things individually if you want to incorporate bits and pieces. But it's important to collaborate within the workspace and get that reusability running. Work towards uniformity. Try and stay away from bespokeness, and set and follow company standards where possible, so that everyone knows how it should be done and then where to use it. Do not rework historical created elements where it's not needed. Don't recreate them, and communicate what reusable elements are available and where to get the best advantages from them. So work smarter, not harder.